So we're starting chapter 10 today then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, we're just swapping days.
Is the exam gonna have questions on chapter 10 too, or is it just?
No.
8 and 9?
No, 8 and 9.
That's not fair and that's evil.
It's evil.
So is everybody with me now?
Yes.
The nervous system transmits information bidirectionally. Every nervous impulse goes like this. Input. Processing/integration. Processing and integration. Then output. Input is generally considered to be sensory. Now I want you to understand we have far more than just the 5 senses that are taught to children in elementary school. A lot of them you may not think of senses, but such things as a need for energy, so you up your blood sugar. Such things as a need for sleep. You see where I'm going with this? I want you to understand that input, even if it's considered sensory, doesn't necessarily have to mean just what you see, just what you hear. Is everybody clear on that? The processing and integration happens in the central nervous system. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But essentially, the information gets carried from whatever sense triggers it to the CNS. That's the standardized abbreviation for central nervous system. Capital C, capital N, capital S. It then goes out, the output. And that is generally going to fall under the heading of motor output, some type of movement. But I also want you to realize it could also be something like releasing a hormone, generating a sense of hunger, a sense of fatigue, automatically letting you sweat. You get the idea here. I just want us to move beyond this elementary school vision that people have about senses and output. So many people just don't think beyond the obvious, but your nervous system functions and controls a lot of functions that you never think about and most likely aren't even aware you have. Is everyone clear on that? The goal of all of this is the underlying function or purpose of the nervous system, homeostasis. Homeostasis. In other words, the maintenance of the internal environment. It is possible to consciously override certain outputs. For example, skipping a meal. You get up early like I do, eat breakfast, you skip lunch. Today's my super long day. It's about 13 hours by the time I get home. If I skip lunch, I'm going to be feeling it by the time I get home about 6:30 tonight. Would you all agree? But I could make myself skip that lunch, and I could make myself function. May not be pleasant, but you can override it to a limited degree. I want you to underline that, to a limited degree. Eventually, the unconscious part of your nervous system is going to override and take control. Even if you don't eat, your body will begin to break down reserves. First, the glycogen in the liver, then the fat cells. People who talk about holding their breath until they're blue in the face or some such nonsense. Kids are very famous for that, toddlers. No, you'll hold your breath. Eventually, you will try to draw one, period. You cannot stop it. You will. You can't control it. You see where I'm going with this? So understand that the control is a balance or an interplay between the conscious, the unconscious, the automatic, and the voluntary. And the only goal in this, and I do mean the only goal, ultimately, is homeostasis. Everybody clear on that? So, what does the nervous system actually look like? Well, it looks like I'm disconnected again. Apologize for continually using my memory here, but if we don't have access to the textbook, I guess we're going to have to rely on it. The nervous system can physically be divided into two separate categories. The first is called the peripheral nervous system. If you want to abbreviate that as capital P, capital N, capital S, that is completely fine with me. That is pretty much a standard notation I have seen used in just about every class I've ever taken or taught. Is that used in the medical field as well? PNS and CNS?
I've never seen it, but I'm sure that in the doctor's notes they did.
Okay.
But I wouldn't see that anyway, because
Okay.
You know what I mean?
The PNS has several different divisions to it. The first way that you can divide it up is motor versus sensory. Motor versus sensory. The sensory portion is the input. It's what goes in. The motor is the output. It's what comes out of the central nervous system. These can also be divided into the afferent and efferent, A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T, and E-F-E-R-E-N-T, afferent and efferent. The PNS can also be subdivided into the voluntary nervous system and the involuntary or autonomic nervous system. From those particular names, I'm pretty sure you can figure out that the voluntary is something that you can consciously control. You get to decide when, where, what, why, and how. If I move my finger, that's voluntary, isn't it? Everybody see that? The autonomic or involuntary is due solely to the automatic functions that you don't have control of. Digestion, heartbeat, blinking your eyes. Oh wait, I can blink my eyes, can't I? Well, this is something, again, that people often tend to overlook. There is some overlap between the two systems. Be sure that you understand that. Can you control your breathing? You can breathe slow and deep to calm yourself down. You can breathe fast and shallow and hyperventilate. But the instant you stop thinking about it, the autonomic kicks right in and takes over. Everybody see that? Blinking is a great example, isn't it? You really can't control whether or not you blink. You will eventually blink. Your eyes will dry out otherwise. Your vision will get cloudy and it will generally be an unpleasant experience. But if you want to actually blink several times because you think you've got something in your eye, you've got a burning irritation, whatever, you can do so, can't you? Y'all want to hear a fun story? Not fun, it's kind of sad actually, but it's a story about that. Do you know how the United States became aware that the pilots who were shot down over North Vietnam and imprisoned were being tortured? The North Vietnamese actually brought in a camera crew and reporter to record one of the POWs on camera admitting to bombing and blah, blah, blah as a propaganda effort. And the captors warned him that he would be beaten severely if he said anything off script. So he actually blinked the word torture in Morse code. And they found out about it. So totally irrelevant to the lecture, but kind of cool fact of history. A couple of other stories I know, but we won't get into them here. Y'all laugh at me. As dead as the class is, I have to say something on occasion. I will give you credit, though. You generally don't talk during class. So back to involuntaries. Everybody understand that? The overlap? Breathing, blinking. Another one that might surprise you would be your esophagus. The upper, say, third of your esophagus is voluntary. The lower third is involuntary, and the middle third is somewhat of an overlap. You get to control when you swallow if you want, don't you? If you end up regurgitating something, that's generally beyond your control, isn't it, once it starts? See what I mean? Because that is a reflexive autonomic function. A reflexive autonomic function. So sensory input. You are almost certainly aware of the 5 classical senses. Let's go over them just somewhat quickly. First up, wait, we didn't talk about the central nervous system, I apologize. The CNS, the central nervous system. The CNS is very often labeled the control center. I don't like that because it's not exactly correct. It's made up of not one, but 2 different parts of the nervous system. Number 1, and one we will spend far more time on than you ever wanted to. I promise you, you're going to learn more about this particular organ than you ever thought possible, because this particular author really likes to talk about the brain. The brain is responsible for almost all of the integration, processing, command, and control. It takes the input, it integrates it. Does anybody know what integration means? It puts it together with other inputs. It stacks it, it collates it. You walk into your mom's kitchen and you smell something yummy cooking, and you skipped lunch. Well, your brain immediately tells you that you are hungry, right? You smell that yummy stuff, whatever mom's got on the stove. That is a different input, isn't it? It's a smell. It goes to your memory in your brain, and your brain integrates it with the memory of taste as well as smell, doesn't it? And suddenly you're not only hungry, you're hungry for that particular dish that's bubbling on the stove, because you remember how yummy it tastes and you're anticipating the joy of the taste. Because food can be delightful, can't it? Does everybody see how this works? That's what integration means. Taking multiple outputs and putting them together. Taking multiple outputs and putting them into a coherent whole. It requires multiple senses. It relies on memory. It's not just stacking something and sending it out. You can also actually override the desire. Command and control, most ways it's the same thing. I kind of like to differentiate them because I like to think of command as the voluntary side of it. You decide you don't want to wait, so you grab a spoon and you dip it into the sauce and you grab a quick taste. That's a command, right? Directly just putting it in your mouth, chewing and tasting, that's more or less automatic. That's what I call control. Everybody with me?
Speaking of like senses, like, you know, like you're eating something and you don't like the way like it tastes, or like you're taking a medicine, you don't want to take it, and you plug your nose so you can't taste it. How does that?
I'll get there.
Okay.
Again, probably more detail than you ever wanted to know. It's simply, really, if you want to get down to it, because taste and smell are actually one sense. They're the same sense. Y'all didn't realize that? There's a trick to it. So, the central nervous system, the brain, is the command and control. The other portion of the CNS is the spinal cord. The spinal cord. The spinal cord plays a key role as essentially the main switchboard. You all never knew the joys of 5-digit numbers and party lines. Y'all ever heard of a party line? Believe it or not, the telephone system used to be so underdeveloped in the country areas that 4 people might share one phone number. And believe it or not, my grandparents for a while actually did have a party line. It would ring differently for each individual, but you never knew who was listening. If it didn't ring individually, if everybody got it, then it could go to the wrong person, couldn't it? See where I'm going with this? What I want you to understand is without the spinal cord, the signals don't go where they're supposed to. The signals have to come in. That's input. They have to reach the brain, and they have to reach the correct parts of the brain, and probably in the correct order, don't they? But you also have to have the signals get out from the brain to the various parts of the body. This is one of the reasons why spinal cord injuries can be so devastating to people, because they mean you lose both sensation and motor control. You lose both sensation and motor control. So not only can you not walk, you can't even feel someone touching your leg. You can't even tell that your skin is burning because the signal cannot pass a break. Is everyone clear on that? So next up, we've got output. The input comes in, the brain processes it, it integrates it, and it then makes a selection of an action to take. That action then is executed. That is the output. You scratch that itch. You eat that sandwich. You duck to avoid that ball flying straight towards your head. You hit the horn on your car and make a gesture that you shouldn't make to that driver that you think cut you off. All of that is output. So everybody stand and stretch, pop your joints, do something different for 30 seconds. Y'all keep yawning this way, I'm gonna go to sleep. So everybody with me? That help? Okay, so let's talk about input. Let's go with the classics. Number one, the most obvious. If you had to keep only a single sense, I'd be willing to bet most of you would probably choose sight. Sight is generally considered by humans to be probably their most important sense. If you hear a loud noise, what's the first thing you do? Turn to look. You see something going on in the distance, what's the first thing you do? Turn to look. You're talking to someone, what do? You look at them. You look them in the eye. I had to do mock interviews yesterday for the nursing crowd, and I could tell which students were comfortable with the interview and which ones weren't, because They didn't look me in the eye. What the senses of sight tell you is essentially electromagnetic radiation. Electromagnetic radiation. The EM spectrum. Has anybody ever heard of that? Basically, we classify electromagnetic radiation based on wavelength. How far apart are the peaks of the wave? Everybody see that? Generally, and you may want to underline that because it's not necessarily a truism, but generally, the shorter wavelengths carry much more energy. What we see as color is simply the reflection of electromagnetic energy off a surface. It is a reflection that we are seeing. Your eyes can only detect a very narrow portion of the whole EM spectrum. Just to give you an idea of how some of this is, the longest wavelengths that carry the least energy tend to be radio waves, radio. Those are very long and they require very little energy. But they also travel very great distances because they don't lose a lot of their energy. As the wavelengths get shorter, you get into what we call microwaves. These typically have a wavelength that's measured in millionths of a meter. And now you know how we get the term microwaves. Then you get into what we call the infrared portion of the spectrum. Infrared, I-N-F-R-A-R-E-D. Humans cannot see this. It is generally understood to be heat. But heat is just a form of EM radiation. That's all. You can feel it because of the energy, but you can't see it.
I have a question that's a little bit off topic, but I watched Zootopia the other day, and there was this character, and it was like a heat-sensing viper, a heat-sensing snake. Is that real? I just have to know.
Yes, vipers can sense heat. The reason they can do so is they have specialized organs that detect it. It's like you see all the movies, the snake sticks its tongue out, doesn't it? Does anybody know why the snake sticks its tongue out?
The smell. I always thought it was the smell.
Because it's a sense of smell. Without getting into the specifics of it, they essentially have a specialized organ that can sense that wavelength.
So they see heat in a way, or they just...
To a degree. When you put on night vision goggles and you see the blurry things moving around,
Yeah.
what you are doing is those goggles are sensing the infrared electromagnetic radiation and converting it into visual spectrum energy for you. You're not actually seeing the heat itself. The goggles are, and they're converting it. Is everybody clear on that? Yes, sir.
What about sharks?
What about them?
Their electroreceptors, how do those work?
That's completely different, and I am not ready to answer that one. I'll have to look that one up. It's not a bad question, but I want everybody to understand that's not electromagnetic radiation. Is everybody okay with that? Now we're finally to the visible portion of the spectrum. The red end is the lowest energy end. Typically, we classify the spectrum into 7 colors based on our subjective perception of those. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. If y'all want a little acronym that will help you remember it, Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. The red, being the longest wavelength, has the least energy. The violet, being the shortest wavelength, carries the most energy. Then we come to the portion known as ultraviolet, basically meaning above and beyond the violet. Ultraviolet radiation is also non-detectable by humans. It is now out of our visual range. However, it can and does cause damage. DNA actually absorbs ultraviolet light over any other type. So this is the type that most damages your DNA. It can cause burns if you stare into a UV light. It can cause burns on your skin. If you have ever been sunburned, you have had the pleasure of having an overexposure to ultraviolet light. Some people, for some reason, willingly expose themselves to long periods of short-wave, pure ultraviolet light multiple times a week to intentionally damage their skin to increase their melanin production. Tanning beds. I don't think your generation does it nearly as much as mine did.
Oh, they do it more.
Huh?
They do it more.
Well, if you do tanning bed twice a week for an hour, you're basically having the same cancer risk as if you are smoking 2 packs of cigarettes.
I know some girls who go every single day. Like when their 24 hours is up for the tanning.
Well, assuming they don't die from the melanoma, by the time they're my age, their skin will look approximately the consistency of boot leather. You'll have to figure it out, Devin, since you're late. I'm not telling you not to tan. I'm not telling you to tan. I want you to be aware there is a real danger and a real cost. Is everybody clear on that? Because you can't sense it, you don't get to see how much of that light is impacting you. So you aren't aware until your other senses tell you it's already damaged. Is everybody clear on that? Then we move into even shorter wavelengths called X-rays. X-rays. X-rays are so energetic, they basically punch right through most living tissue. Every single time you get an X-ray of any kind, you are willingly damaging your tissue. Obviously, there's a trade-off, the risk to benefit ratio, right? You heard of that? The vast majority of the time, the risk of damage to the X-ray is far outweighed by the diagnostic benefit of receiving the X-ray. Notice that the denser tissue, like bone, is not transparent to X-rays. Then you get into the shortest part of the spectrum, and this is what we call gamma radiation. Gamma radiation. And I've only been knowingly exposed to gamma one time in my life. And y'all know I used to work with radioactive material. I've ever told you about that? Radioactive phosphorus. Radioactive phosphorus is a beta emitter, which means that you can block it with a sheet of plexiglass about that thick. It's no big deal. I tended to work behind a shield just so I wouldn't expose my whole body. My hands were exposed, but I had a little ring dosimeter that basically let me know how much I was getting and keep me within the limits. When the university decided to close the herbarium, which was the stored plants that we had, just dry pressed plants, they were shipping it to Texas Tech University, and in part of the packing up and moving process, one of the graduate students discovered a small metal cylinder about this big that had the radioactive warning label on it. Well, obviously that should not have been in the herbarium, right? And since it was radioactive, it was obviously hot, and therefore we needed to check it. So Gary, the graduate student who found it, brought it over to our lab because he knew we had hot lab facilities, including a Geiger counter. As soon as he walked in the door, you hear the Geiger counter start to go tick, 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 because every time it's hit by a beam of radiation, it clicks. So yeah, it's hot. Thanks for bringing that in, Gary. Put it behind the shield. So he sets it behind my plexiglass shield, and we pull the Geiger counter to the front of the shield, and it still goes tick, 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 tick. At that point, I knew we had something pretty hot. So we had a centrifuge in the lab. The centrifuge has a steel door that is a foot thick, literally. It was like a submarine hatch. It was protection. It was that armored because the speeds at which that thing spun, if something came loose, it would really cause some damage. So Gary put it into the centrifuge and closed the lid. We set the Geiger counter on the lid, and guess what? Tick, 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 tick. I said, see ya, and went home. Turns out it was a calibration source for radiotherapy that had been misplaced in the hospital years before. I hate to think of how long that thing had been in a herbarium. That might explain some of the behavior of those people. And who's the glowing green guy on the Avengers? The Incredible Bulk? Yeah, I know it's Hulk. I call him the Bulk. Didn't he overdose on gamma radiation, supposedly? Well, I hate to tell him, but he wouldn't turn into a glowing green guy with big muscles. He would get radiation poisoning, and he would die a lingering, painful death. Because radiation at that level, it punches through everything, including your bones. And it does so much damage because it's so energetic that if you get a lethal dose, it won't kill you immediately, but you're guaranteed to die. Don't look at me that way. I'm not exposing any of you to gamma. Ultraviolet's no fun. Did I ever tell you about the time I was working with DNA at midwinter? Well, I knew what it was, and I knew it was dangerous, so I'm wearing goggles, all right? And unfortunately for me, I was not wearing the full face shield. And I was working over the UV light table a little bit too long. And when I went home that night, I looked in the mirror and I kind of had a reverse raccoon effect. Where the goggles were, my skin was white. Outside of that, it was beet red. And this was in the middle of January. Good times. So you might see where detecting that is important, right? That is the sense of sight, electromagnetic detection. And before somebody asks, I didn't list all of the colors, that's because most colors are combinations. Combinations. There are two exceptions. Number one is white. Does everybody know what white is?
Yeah,
Huh?
it's all of them reflected.
Correct. This whiteboard is essentially reflecting all of the visual spectrum. What about black?
All the colors absorbed.
Bingo. It's absorbing everything in the visual spectrum. Everybody see that? Apparently not. That was a pun. Anyway, back to the senses. Next up is the sense of hearing, sound. True or false, deaf people can hear some sounds? Trick question, depends. A lot of them can feel the vibrations in their body. And that is what sound is, vibrations. All you are detecting are vibrations. When I move my vocal cords, I am moving air molecules, right? Those vibrations of the air molecules move through the air at different speeds. And your ear collects them. Think of the shape of the ear. You ever wonder why it looks so odd on the outside? It's essentially because it is a receiving antenna. It collects and funnels all of those into the ear canal. And once in the ear, they actually cause the bones in the ear to vibrate. It's like a little telegraph key. And that is in turn converted into a neural input. It's converted into a nerve impulse. Those two are easy. The rest of the senses are a little bit more complex. Kylie asked about the sense of taste and the sense of smell. They are the same thing. They are your body's chemosensors. Your chemosensors. They detect chemicals. The only difference between them is the concentrations at which they can detect. Air is a gas, would you agree? That means that the molecules in the air are moving apart, banging off each other at a very high rate of speed. They're further apart, they're no longer connecting. Everybody agree with that? In a liquid, the molecules are far more concentrated because they don't have as much energy. They're not bouncing off each other as much. They're not spreading apart as much. That's why liquid has a consistency that is thicker than gas. Liquids can have different consistencies, can't they? We call that viscosity. And finally, solids, the molecules are still moving, but they're vibrating. They don't fly apart. We take advantage of these physical properties when we dissolve things. If you dissolve something into a glass of water, it is going to be more concentrated than if you dissolve it into air. Does everyone agree? And that is literally the only difference between your sense of smell and your sense of taste. Smell detects chemicals that are dissolved in the air. Little chunks of whatever it is break off into the air, and when you breathe in, those molecules actually bind to nerve endings in the nose. The actual molecule is binding. So when you smell poop, the poop molecules are binding in your nose. Makes you feel good, doesn't it? It's just a chemosensor. That's all you're detecting are the various chemicals present. When you put something in your mouth, you chew it, don't you? Call that process of mastication. Mastication. And in breaking it up mechanically, you also put small bits and pieces of it into solution, into your saliva. That is the solvent, the saliva. As a result, those molecules are far, far more concentrated than in the air. So as a result, your sense of taste is much stronger than your sense of smell. And that is one of the reasons why when you get a respiratory illness, your sense of taste tends to diminish. Because the smell of the food is almost as important as the taste of the food. We distinguish between them because we like to label them separate senses, but for all intents and purposes, they are the same. The only difference is, do they detect chemicals in solution or do they detect chemicals in the air? Make sure you know that, get that, and quit yawning. Put me to sleep. Anybody in here ever accidentally bit down on medicine or a pill or a drug? How does it taste? It is one of the most bitter things you ever have tasted, isn't it? The reaction you have is immediate and visceral. You want to spit it out. It lingers, doesn't it? The most effective thing is to drink copious amounts of water or some other liquid. That is because you are trying to dilute that concentrated substance that you have on your taste buds. Does anybody know why it tastes so bad?
So children don't eat it?
So anyone doesn't eat it. It is your body's warning system. It is your warning system. And nobody's writing that down. Why am I even talking? We got people playing solitaire, people studying for the lab exam. Am I that boring? I'm not completely clueless. Write that down. It's your warning system. Almost all medications are based on drugs. Those are secondary compounds. And secondary means they're not necessary for the metabolic function of the organism they come from. Caffeine, for example. Does anybody know what role caffeine plays in plant metabolism? It doesn't. The plant has no direct need for it. So why does the plant bother to make it? Anybody want to take a guess? As a chemical defense against insects. It is chemical warfare. Didn't know that? Caffeine is a pesticide. Nicotine, pesticide. Cocaine, pesticide. Has anybody here ever drunk black coffee? Anybody here like black coffee? I'm with you. It tastes good. That's black. The reason coffee tastes so bitter is the caffeine. It is a warning system to your body to let you know that you are ingesting something that is toxic. And yes, caffeine is a toxin. Does anybody know the difference between a drug and a toxin? You might want to get this one down. If you don't, it's actually useful. Dose. That's all. Dose. Although you really have to wonder about the first guy who made coffee. Has anybody here actually ever seen a coffee tree? They don't have beans. What they have are little red berries. Looks like a holly berry on steroids. You have to dry those, but not too fast. All of the red part falls off and you're left with the seed. The seed is what we call the bean. I think we've all seen roasted coffee beans, haven't we? But then you have to roast them, which means you have to heat them at a certain temperature, not hot enough to burn them or char them, but not cool enough that they don't roast, and you have to do it for just the right amount of time because you want to dry them out but not parch them. Then you grind them up into a powder. Everybody's seen coffee grounds, right? Then you pour boiling water over it and drink it. Who on earth thought to do all of that and then ingest the bitter tasting stuff? It worked. Your sense of taste also lets you know when something dangerous is nearby. Anybody here ever smelled rotting meat? It's very disgusting, isn't it? Immediate gut level visceral reaction again. You don't want to be near that, do you? It is a warning to let you know that carrion contains compounds that are probably going to be hazardous to you. Carrion being rotten food. Even the unpleasant smell of feces, poop, lets you know that it contains chemicals that are unpleasant, things that you don't want. So your sense of taste and your sense of smell are both warning systems. Paradoxically, they are both keyed to your reward system as well. Does anybody here like sweets? That is because it is a reward to you for consuming a high energy intense food. It tastes good, doesn't it? You want more, don't you? So you get more, don't you? Everybody see how that works? High energy doesn't always mean sweet, does it? It could mean fat. If you like burgers, or if you like steak, or if you like bacon, you see where I'm going with this. So your chemosensors are very important to you. And then what is the last sense? Touch. Touch is way more than just touch. At its most basic level, it is a pressure sensor. a pressure sensor. It lets you know how much force is being exerted onto your body or your skin. One of you guys want to be a guinea pig?
Sure.
What
He was
is
late.
He was late. All right, you're
He
gonna
was
be.
later than I was.
I want you to close your eyes and hold up your hand like this. I'm not gonna do anything bad with that. I'm just gonna touch it. All right. Everybody see how many fingers I'm holding up? How many fingers did I touch you with? 2. Open your eyes. Now I'm going to do the same to your back. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody looking? How many?
I don't know. I'll say 2.
2.
Have a guess.
Do you realize that your hands are far, far more sensitive to touch than your back? Thank you.
Yeah.
I've never done that experiment yet where everybody got it right 100%. You almost always can because your hands, your fingers, have more nerve endings. There are way more innervated, I-N-N-E-R-V-A-T-E-D, innervated. That is a word that means they have lots of nerve endings. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Anybody here ever babysat a toddler or played with a toddler? You hand them anything, what's the first thing they do with it?
No matter.
They grab it. Then they put it in their mouth. First thing they do though is grab something. Y'all ever notice that? The first thing people do is poke things, hopefully generally with a stick. Almost anything that we want to investigate, we are going to use our hands to do it first, because they are the most sensitive parts of the skin. 2 that are related to that, the face. The face is very sensitive, the area around the lips especially, right? And the genitalia, the external genitalia. Those are your most sensitive portions of your body. And what they sense is pressure. That is what touch is. The caress of a lover, the thump of a punch on your skin, it is all pressure. Didn't realize that's what that was, did you? We call it touch. It is not the only sense in the skin. What we call touch has 2 other senses that are very closely related to it. The first of those is thermal. You can feel that cool breeze on your skin right now, can't you? To me, it feels good. The way Piper's bundled up, I'd say it doesn't feel good to her. But it lets you know that you want to get warmer, doesn't it? It lets me know that I like to sit here. I don't want to go in the lab because I know I'll start sweating in here. Thermosensors, heat and cold. Make sure you get that. We consider that under the general heading of touch because either the breeze is touching your skin or you touch something directly, don't you? I put my hand there and I can feel that's cool. I'm sure your mom always put her hand in your forehead to see if you had a fever. Yeah, like you've got a temperature scale built in. Does everybody know what the last one is? Most people don't think of this as a sense at all, but I guarantee you it is. And it's probably your most important sense. Pain. Pain is a damage sensor. A damage sensor. It lets you know something is wrong. Ignore pain at your peril. When you feel pain and you want to be stubborn and not go to the doctor, you are ignoring your body's warning system. You get into your car and you get a red light on the pressure sensor in your right rear tire, you're generally going to go get it checked out, aren't you? You get a recurring pain that's always occurring right here, you ignore it for a week or two. Or you go to the doctor and they tell you it's tendonitis and you've got inflammation of your tendon. My last visit. Pain is in many ways the most important of your senses because it lets you know when you are damaged. Most people also lump that under touch. Touch. Again, you've got some overlap. Another pressure sensor that you may not realize is a pressure sensor is your ear. Your ear. It works with your sense of pain to let you know when the pressure in the atmosphere is too high or too low, doesn't it? Y'all ever had to pop your ears to equalize pressure? That's because your external atmospheric pressure sensor actually works. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Y'all know what the last of these senses is? Equilibrium. Equilibrium. You are able to tell up from down, left from right, side to side. If you don't believe me, stand on your head and see how long you're able to hold it. Does anybody know how that works? It is due to fluid in your inner ear. Your inner ear has a very, very complex system of tubes, and nobody's writing this down, that contain fluid with little hair-like projections that stick out into them that let you know whether or not you are actually level and stable. Has anybody here ever used a level, a carpenter's level, a bubble? It's literally just a little tube filled with a liquid that's generally colored, has a single bubble in it, and two lines. And to see if something's level, you move it until the bubble is between the lines. Exact same principle is going on in your inner ear. And let me tell you, if you ever get that messed up, it will mess you up. Has anybody here ever had vertigo? I don't mean dizziness, I mean vertigo. It's a very unpleasant experience, isn't it? I told y'all about almost falling off the bluff years ago, didn't I? Slipping and falling, cracking my head. Did I tell you about messing up my inner ear from the blow?
Yeah.
I got hit so hard that they thought I had a bleed on the brain because I was suffering vertigo. They did a CT scan. It turned out I wasn't bleeding on the brain, but the doc said, "You've messed up your inner ear." And I essentially had to regenerate those little hairs in there because the sharp blow had damaged them. And for the first 2 weeks after that, the vertigo was so bad, I remember one night laying on the bed, clutching the bed. I'm completely flat, no pillows or anything. And it felt like the bed was just doing this. It's a very, very unpleasant experience. Y'all know about the stealth fighter, don't you? The F-117, the first stealth fighter. 2 of those were actually lost in crashes before they acknowledged it to the public. And the reason for that was because the pilots got spatial disorientation. That's the term for it. Spatial disorientation. One person's getting that down. It allows you to know where you're at. These pilots literally flew their planes into the ground because they did not know which way was up. I see a couple of you shaking your head, but if you're flying a stealth plane at 3 in the morning and it's pitch black with no sunlight, or moonlight. They literally did not realize they were heading in a dive and flew straight into the ground. Pretty wild, isn't it? Anybody here ever got turned upside down while underwater? It's a scary experience, isn't it? I went off a high dive one time. I said, never again. And not because I did a belly flop, but because until I calmed down and let my natural buoyancy carry me back up, I really didn't know where I was. I wasn't turned around, I just was underwater. So your sense of equilibrium is a very, very important one. And make sure you get that down, make sure you know it, make sure that you understand it.